to The Future of Work. In this series, we talk to experts who are moving the needle, innovating, and making a difference in the workplace. I am your host, Jessica Price. I am an assistant professor in corporate health management and well-being. And today I am so delighted to have with us the wonderful Miss Sandra Schengen. And Sandra is the head of HR and people management at the Spuerkeess bank here in Luxembourg. It's a very traditional, well-established bank in the corporate sector here in Luxembourg. What makes Sandra's profile particularly unique and interesting is that she's also a clinical psychologist by training and has had significant experience in the area of human resources, and she's passionate about people. So welcome, Sandra.
Yes, welcome, Jessica. I'm so happy to be here. It's so nice to meet you and be at the Lunex. It's the first time for me, so I heard a lot about the Lunex. We are working together with Lunex, so we have a very good collaboration. Therefore, it's absolutely nice to be here today.
We have lots of territory to cover. You were mentioning a little bit about your background before we started recording. Do you mind telling me a little bit about your background?
My background initially was more in economics and law. After graduating, I decided to focus more on something absolutely different at that moment. I was always interested in why are people functioning like they do? Kind of trying to demystify behaviors and know more about where does the behavior come from and what we can learn about it. And so it was so nice. And I really loved studying in Strasbourg at the time. And then afterwards, I entered more pure hazard in HR. I started more than 20 years ago. So
time flies, huh?
Yeah, time flies, but it's still super nice.
Yeah. And I think since we start with what you're doing now, first question that comes to my mind, and I think a lot of people would want to know, what does the regular work day in the life of a head of human resources looks like? Yeah. Because there's a lot of misconceptions that it's very administrative or a lot of decision making. And since you love working with people, I wonder whether that's still possible for you to work with people. So tell us about your regular days.
Absolutely. No, I think that, of course, in HR, you have the operational, but also the strategic projects. And of course, today, HR is a lot of the time more focused on the perception people have that we are only there to measure and to coordinating a lot in the background. But it's more than that. And actually, I think that with the future we are heading to in terms of working environment, all the new challenges in this VUCA world, I think the role of HR is absolutely changing and this transformation is key. What I'm doing for the moment is actually help the HR department to become like this strategic business enabler. So of course in the past we were more like a traditional support department, but this is no longer possible with all the challenges the business is facing. We have to provide them with the right tools and make sure that we keep our people on board.
A lot of challenges there,
yes,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
What is the part of your job that you most enjoy? Tell us. What's the fun part? What's the part that makes you feel more satisfied?
I think for me, because I'm really passionate about people, working together with our employees, it's the most, I would say the nicest part of the day. I think that as we are doing our internal transformation for the moment, of course, this is also really nice and enriching because I can really have an impact and try to focus the whole team around this specific mission. And for me, it's the most important part today. That's really nice because you can build something for the future. And that's what makes it really, I'm really grateful for that. Of course, you have a lot of challenges because you have to provide a lot of data for the business so they can lead their HR function. And of course, you have to follow the technical evolution to stay in the loop to make us future ready.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of anxiety around what the future of work means. And we are talking about artificial intelligence, automatization. And of course, I can imagine that being able to keep people in mind, but at the same time incorporating these automation trends that will have an impact on how people work, it's challenging. I can imagine there might be a lot of pressure in that regard. But you have given us an overview. And I was wondering if there is something about the ideas that people have about what is it like to work in HR that are wrong, or a misconception that people perhaps have certain stereotypes running in their heads. What would you say is the greatest misconception about being the head of human resources?
I think the biggest misconception is, in fact, that business and also the employees and all our managers think that HR can solve all the personal-related issues. And of course, this is not possible. What we are discovering more and more is how important this collaboration is between HR and the business on the one hand, so generally spoken, but also on the other hand, have this close relationship also with the managers. Because what we need to do as HR is to have them as an ally, to stay people on board and make sure we can develop them as they would like to. Because everybody is discussing a lot about talent retention. And I think this becomes, especially also for Luxembourg, so important because we are such a small country. And of course, it's nice to have this multicultural background, but this is also a challenge. So what do we have to do to keep everybody onboarded?
I would completely agree with you. I think that this rich pluralism that we find in Luxembourg is certainly an opportunity.
Absolutely.
But it can be a great challenge. One has to manage that diversity so that it really yields the expected results. You're right to point out that a lot of ideas around what HR is about talent attraction and retention. But what the latest trends in the workplace let us know is that having or paying close attention to quality of life measures is extremely important. If talent burns out or if talent develops illnesses because of intense work pressures or chronic stress, then it's a big problem, right?
Yes,
it doesn't really lead to the levels of productivity that companies require these days. For us, having a bachelor in corporate health management and well-being, the topic of health and well-being in the workplace is extremely important. We kind of feel that although it's in the news in a strange way, it needs to be more talked about. It needs to be recognized that this is a challenge here in Luxembourg. So I'm very curious to know, what is your own personal definition of health and well-being in the workplace? How do you see this big field?
Well, I think that everything around health and well-being is getting more and more, for me, also a key to success for the company. When we are talking about retention, keeping employees in good health is one of the key occupations for a company and of course also for HR. Because when we are speaking about traditional HR, you just tick the boxes. We organize a health week and we organize some training. So this is really nice. But what we would like to have is building also this cultural background to enable also the managers and create a working environment by itself inclusive and healthy. And of course, HR has a key role to play because managers can do this too, but you need to have the right tools to do so. So for us, it's really important to provide them with the right tools so that they are also able to do it, because we can't expect every manager to be at the top knowledge in HR. That's not really his core business. But it's important to have a kind of this awareness and to pay attention to people. So everybody's talking about this, like caring about people. And in the past, it was sometimes people, it's like Marcus always tells in his courses, like fluffy stuff. But this is no longer the case. When they are not motivated, we are not able to give them the passion to thrive, we will really have a big problem in terms of performance.
Absolutely. We see, at least in Luxembourg, that there was a survey recently published on quality of life. We had seen a decline in terms of people that measure that what is their perception in regards to their quality of life. And there's a very ambitious and competitive financial sector in Luxembourg. If you put those two together, there's more work pressure, there's more desire to bring the business forward, while at the same time people experience a diminishment in their quality of life. It feels like a ticking bomb, right? It feels like there's something that needs to change and needs to be done. And I'm wondering I wonder if you can tell us about what is your department doing at the moment in this field of health and well-being, if anything, and can you give us some idea of how are you addressing these questions or this topic?
Well, we have an exco who is quite aware of the importance of health at the workplace. And we started already years ago. I think it was when we had our 150th anniversary when we started offering
150th anniversary?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a long time ago because we exist since 1989. Then we started with all these initiatives around health. So we offered, for example, a health checkup for every employee interested in doing so. So it was on a voluntary basis. We are working together with an external institute focusing a lot on prevention. So are there any physical maybe problems, health problems for the person or maybe mental issues? So they are focusing on these two main topics. But this is not sufficient. So what we also started to do internally is organizing special health days on mental health, physical health, and the combination of mind and body. This will also reflect on your body, and this will also reflect on your absence, illness, and everything. So for us, it was so important. We also started nearly a year ago to offer special trainings also to our managers, because that was the first time we started to imply them in this whole discussion around health, giving them specific tools, for instance, it's maybe kind of very elementary, but like a checklist. So how they can speak with people when they are in a difficult situation. Checklist on how can I stay in touch with a person who is in a longer absence or longer illness leave? How can I recognize the first signs of burnout? We are not only giving the tools to the managers so that they can focus on their employees, but what we are trying to do is, because we are launching leadership months, where we try to build a leadership community. And there we have, for example, organized also a conference on self-care. So how can managers be also healthy themselves by facing everyday challenges in business and also in people, supporting people, because this takes also a lot of energy. And for us, it was important to provide both the right tools. So employees by all kind of conferences or health days, but also for the managers, giving them practical tools how they can deal with health matters in the workplace.
I really get the impression that your approach is very encompassing. It includes all different levels. And when you talked about managers, I just thought that many managers, particularly mid-level managers, complain about being in a sandwich situation where the pressures come top down and then bottom up, and they deal with the frustrations or the needs or the demands of two large groups, right? And so it's really a particularly vulnerable group when it comes to health issues.
Absolutely. Because what we see often, what I saw in the past years, was that sometimes managers were not able to recognize that they had a mental issue themselves. They start having mental workloads. What we see is people at work, but they are also private people.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, when you have maybe kids or when you have, a lot of private challenges too. And when this comes additionally to also work-life challenges, it gets really, really hard for them.
I think there is talk about this spillover effect that when people are overwhelmed at work, you have this spillover effect at home and vice versa. They can bring personal challenges. People have complicated contemporary lives. And in Luxembourg, there's the additional challenge of people having long commuting times in the country. What are the tools? What are the ways? And I really like that in your approach, you're looking at the connection between physical and mental health. A lot of times people recognize frequent headaches or stomach pain, but they won't recognize that they're beginning to feel depressed, developing an anxiety disorder. It's through the body that they first realize, there's something going on, right?
Therefore, it's also so important because we won't be able to fix everything at work. That's for sure. I think a difficult situation in Luxembourg is, since the expensive for psychologists or healthcare personnel is reimbursed by the CNS, you have a lot of psychologists who are over, you can't get any appointment.
overloaded themselves,
they
right?
are overloaded themselves.
You cannot find that, yeah.
And there we are now trying to connect with different healthcare specialists and maybe to get, I don't know whether it's possible, so we are only starting to think about this, but to be able to provide an employee of the bank the right healthcare professional he needs one.
To make their referral.
Yes, absolutely. So we would lead them to
connect with the specific health
absolutely.
specialist. And I think that's so needed because sometimes people don't know where to go and who to talk
Absolutely.
to. That knowledge is not available. And people might feel a sense of stigma or embarrassment about seeking help. This is something we want to bring over and over again to the table, taking care of yourself, protecting your mental and your physical health. It's part of an adult working life. It's not something exceptional or weird. It's part of our working life to take care of our physical and mental health.
Absolutely. But sometimes it's also difficult to protect yourself, when you have a certain workload.
And certain responsibilities, right?
And you would like to perform and satisfy every stakeholder around you. And that's what makes it so difficult. Of course, we can speak a lot about it. And I think it's a really good thing to do because we talked about stigma. And it's exactly that. I think what we now discovered is a specific platform where you can connect to have digital health counselor.
And I hope it doesn't substitute us at some point, Sandra. But it's available when it's needed. Very important.
It's also an alternative. I don't say now that it's the very best to do, but I think it's a resource. And also with the new generations talking more about mental health and looking for purpose. They don't find purpose or flexibility at work and they risk getting depressed. It's better
that they have a resource there. Absolutely. Oh, that's another podcast conversation. I'm going to keep that in mind because there's a lot of discussion around having digital tools that provide mental health support and the pros and cons of these possibilities, right? But coming back to what we were talking around the particular and unique pressures in Luxembourg, I think you see it more and more in the news that burnout is a huge topic, right? A colleague of mine from the University of Luxembourg was saying, well, we call it occupational depression now.
Yes.
But the word that people know, it's burnout. Yeah. And it seems that it's kind of getting a cultural tipping point. Like the zeitgeist is ready for people to have these conversations and start looking at themselves and wonder and ponder, am I on the way of becoming completely burned out, right? So do you have any thoughts about this, particularly regarding what's happening in the world of work these days? In the past, it didn't seem to be so pervasive that so many people were struggling. I wonder, do you have any thoughts on why the risk of ill-being has increased or conversation has increased so much?
I think for me, there are two main points. First of all, I would say that work has become more demanding and emotionally taxing. We are living, like I just mentioned before, in this VUCA world, very demanding, very challenging, because you have so many changes facing on the everyday basis. So when I consider, for instance, even at we have many projects, which is nice to see a lot of things created and everything. On the other hand, this comes with a lot of workload, a lot of pressure. People are struggling with the whole transformation. You have the digital transformation, the evolution with all the questioning around AI. It's difficult. It's probably more difficult to have this, like 20 years ago. How could I explain? There it was maybe also clearer because you had a focus, you had an objective, and work was organized around this. But today, because there are so many new ideas and everything, it's also in the nature of humans, because normally humans are thriving to new things, to create and everything. So I think globally, this makes people more challenged on a daily basis. On the other hand, people are talking more and more about mental health. You see it on TV, you see it everywhere, also on social media. And I think there are no longer maybe these big, that they are really afraid to talk about. I think today they just mention it. Sometimes they mention it when I won't say when it's too late.
But it can be, right? That people
it could be, because it's also important to see it coming in a certain way. Yeah. But what I saw in the past years is that people normally are functioning and not paying attention on themselves. And of course, at one point of their work, it's no longer possible to. But on the other hand, the big problem, I would say, is that you don't have any magical solution. So you see, the work is more challenging And you see, on the other hand, there are more issues, more mental related issues. You have a lot of stakeholders in this who have to try to fix the problem.
And it's a multifaceted problem because partially it has to do with the demands of work itself. Also, in many cases, has to do with the organizational culture, where behaviors that can be considered toxic can run rampant. Sometimes I wonder to what extent also, that we live this digital overloading. Yeah. We're constantly connected,
Absolutely.
Right?
And this connection is no longer, because since the pandemic situation, people were connected all the time. And now everybody is also equipped by its laptop. And of course, with remote working, which is super nice in terms of flexibility, but sometimes people do no longer respect boundaries.
Correct. Some people work from bed. Mm-hmm. That's a place where you're supposed to rest. It's really a challenge. And then you also mentioned before, and I think that can also be leading to people's dissatisfaction, the lack of purpose at times, right? Yes. And I think for younger employees, different from their parent generations, right? The sense of, I know what I'm doing, this matters on some level is becoming more and more important, right? So we definitely do have a challenge in our hands. And you're right, it's not one easy solution, and it's also not one size fits all. It would have to depend very much on the industry, on the organization, having a hard look at oneself and wonder what are the practices here that are leading people to feel so bad and get sick. One of the things we say in the program is that if a company is making their employees sick, it's definitely not going to be a productive company. Coming down to the bottom line, it affects what they call the bottom line. Promoting health is smart from a business perspective, not just from an ethics point of view, which is important, but also from a business perspective. Interestingly enough, building into what we're talking about, I recently came across a survey here in Luxembourg. For the first time, again, it was in the news, employees place work-life balance ahead of salary. 69% of the interviewees said that they would rather have work-life balance. And what does that say to you, this trend putting this above salary? What does that tell you?
Well, I think we are talking a lot about the new generations coming on the job market and everything. I think that, and as we are also speaking today on the future of work, so I think that these trends reflect simply a significant cultural and generational shift in workplace values, because you just talked about culture and toxic leadership. And for me, it's not a surprise. On the other hand, I wonder myself whether companies are ready also face the new demands from younger generations. This indicator shows clearly that mental health, autonomy, or even personal fulfillment, so purpose, we were talking about purpose, they are probably becoming central in the very near future. Already today, people are speaking a lot about why do I have to do this work and what will be also the outcome in bigger system.
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
And I think when we are speaking about work and working environments, we are talking a lot about feedback culture, working on objectives. So what's the direction in which I have to project also myself, like to have this greater goal and to see clearly what your role is in this greater goal. And of course, this shift is a challenge to HR leaders. That's quite clear. But this shift will also help HR to position itself differently, more in terms of influencing culture, company culture, strategy. But on the other hand, there's one point which surprised me every time when we have younger candidates in a recruitment interview. Even if they are looking for purpose and self-fulfillment and flexibility, they are also looking for a decent salary. So maybe they are not looking for becoming CEO of a company, but they would like to maybe have a family. And of course, you need to have stability too. You mentioned company culture. I think that will probably help a lot of people to see, okay, in what kind of company I would like to work. So when I have candidates in front of me, I'm always asking the question, what are your specific expectations towards us as a company? Because I don't know.
So important.
It's really important because what we are trying to check out is also, is there a match? So are we compatible? And are we also capable of offering everything they ask?
That's so rich that you talk about values, because I think the idea of purpose might be connected not only with what people do, but what the company stands for.
Yes.
And if companies are socially responsible, they care about the community, they get involved, that gives people a sense of satisfaction by affiliation and identification with these values. These values matter for them, the values that the company stands for. Yeah. There's been even research showing that when companies are simply for profit and it's all about money, then there is no true connection, no true identification with the organization. There can be demoralization because money, as we know, goes so far. People have other needs that need to be met.
It's important that leaders are well trained because they are representing the company in front of the employee. When you have the classical micromanagement style, this will no longer function.
The two extremes are bad, right? Laissez-faire, completely disappearing from the life of the employee, or micromanaging and checking out the very last little detail. These two extremes, and everything in the middle happens. And,
absolutely.
And I imagine you must have quite the experiences with that. So we're looking at what needs to change in the workplace, because I think some companies, that to me sounds like it's already putting a lot of effort into, creating a healthier, interesting environment for their talent, but some changes need to happen, right? So from your point of view, what do you think needs to happen? What needs to change? And here I speak in larger terms, not just the bank. In general terms, if we think about the workplace, to be a healthier, happier, more productive place, what would you say needs to happen?
I think that companies in general need to reimagine how they treat people at work. Really have a critical look on what's functioning well and what's not working out. Also imply people actively in this discussion with the younger generations. What they would like to do is also to co-create the workplace.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I think that instead of thinking we have all the best ideas and solutions, is to ask them what would they like to find within the company. I think that's the most important thing.
It's not such a top-down process.
Bottom up. Also try to be realistic on the expectations, because it's not like a list to the Père Noël, but at least listen and explain why they can't implement solution ABC instead of another one. So I think that's the most important thing. Listen to people and to pay attention.
That's absolutely important. That's why I try to drill on my students that learning how to collect data, and how to develop tools that will help really capture what people are thinking and feeling, in the workplace. It's so important.
Yeah, it's a form of respect also, and I think that's the most important thing. People would like to be listened to, be respected, and
to be seen, right? The being seen and being heard is such a human need. Sometimes in some organizations, people do not feel seen, do not feel heard, and that really has negative consequences.
And of course, this is a challenge also for leaders, because when you have, and this is the case in every company, for instance, promoting, also in the past it was a more common approach to promote people in leadership positions who were experts in their domain. Normally they are not people persons. That's a big problem too. So to a leader who is not a people person, that he has to take care of, his or her has to take care of people, it's already not so easy. So it's a process. And what we try to start is to let leaders pass an assessment on how they also function and then what they need. By creating this awareness, we hope that they will be more people-focused, because they see it's like this.
It's an area of improvement.
Yeah,
right?
And how am I also perceived maybe from my employees? So this is important. And get into a discussion with employees and ask employees, okay, so I would like to, that we are work like this and this together, and employees can tell from their point of view, okay, we would like you to be like this. So it's all about communication.
Yeah. And we're kind of now coming to an end, but I have one that's I don't want to not ask. It's really about the future of work. Where do you see the workplace 10 years from now? What do you think from your experience, from the trends that you gather, conversations with colleagues and everything that's being discussed in the field of human resources? Where do you think we'll be in 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and not an easy one. In 10 years, I think that we will probably foster a lot of trends we see already now. So like work flexible, for example. I think we will clearly have more shift from a traditional employment model to a really like kind of an ecosystem of where you will more focus on flexibility and purpose. But on the other hand, we are discussing a lot about AI and the technology and what's the evolution on this. And I think that what I see clearly is, and this has always been the case in the past already with the recent technology improvements, work will change. But jobs won't. Maybe some jobs will disappear, but there are also a lot of jobs being created. So I think that there will be a lot of new jobs we do not even know about.
So we'll have to be more literate in how to use artificial intelligence, right?
So I think that generally, I think work will be more personalized because that's what people are expecting. It's not like everybody gathered around one specific objective. They will look more to bring themselves in. And so it will be, in my opinion, more personalized. And what's also very important, because we see it already now, the transformation in leadership. Leadership in the past was more business focused. Now it's more focused also, and because you spoke about data, I think leadership will be related also to how happy they are at the workplace. Yeah. So when we are talking about variable pay, for example, and leaders are eligible for this, I think management will also look at how happy their people are working together with them. So this is for me also clearly something which is which is coming more and more. I think employees in general have a stronger voice through this because the focus will be more on them. Of course, on the performance, that's clear. But I think leaders in general are quite convinced about they can't do this whole journey without people behind. They need them.
Quite the challenge because I guess you're talking about building still on people's skills and competencies and building also very technical, automated skills and competencies, right? So having both, you cannot just think, I'm just going to be an expert running AI. No, you have to deal with people.
Absolutely. We are speaking a lot about competencies in general, skills in general. What are the skills of the future? What's really clear is, of course, you need some technical skills, but normally the technical skills, you can learn them if you are really motivated to learn them. I think which is more important is this, and I don't like the expression of soft skills.
Soft skills, yes.
You have to be able to build a certain resilience, to adapt yourself, to be open and curious about what's new on the market. Of course, a company can invest a lot in training hours and everything, but the employee also needs to adapt this kind of initiative. I think lifelong learning is so important. Employability is super important.
Yeah. Well, it's been lovely. It's been a lot of food for thought. Is there something you'd like to add that maybe I didn't ask or something that comes to mind?
Well, I think that we spoke a lot about skills, the right mindset, the role of leadership, and of course also the strategic role of HR. I think we quite made the whole tour. I would say that the future of work is what we should pay attention to stay inclusive all the time. People who are more aware of the evolution of technology, it will be easier for them to stay onboarded. But companies have to pay attention to maintain everybody onboarded.
I want to thank you so much for coming all the way to Lunex and taking the time to meet me and our students. We're delighted to have you and look forward to future visits. Thank you very much,
Sandra. Thank you, Jessica, for inviting me. It was such a nice experience.
Thank you.